So let me tell you, I'll start again. I mean, I told you last time we spoke, but basically this lockdown started and I would say the world started to fall apart. It continued to crumble before my eyes, and I just thought, I should really start a podcast. I have the skill set, and I thought there's some definitely some interesting people I could reach out to and maybe start a dialogue and start thinking about how we can do something positive, however big or small that might be, just to try and just reach out to people. And so I started scribbling a list of people on this pad,
Good.
and your name came up.
I was lucky.
And I think it was just, I mean, my first, obviously you knew my brother, but after adding you on Facebook, I started to connect with some of the videos that you were posting of what was going on in California, and I was really tickled by some of the stuff that you were doing with the gentleman on the top of the bus, the parade
Oh,
stuff.
right. That's Curtis Relaford.
Well, you guys, I just thought had just a fantastic energy, and I thought, gosh, the world needs more guys like you two.
Gosh, you even remember that? That's several postings ago, a few months ago. I just spoke with him last week. I know he's coming back down from Oregon. And that guy is one of a kind. You might never meet, the rare. You should have him on your show. He's really a Martin Luther King protege. He models himself after Martin Luther King. He speaks about spirituality and oneness, unity in an elegant, passionate way where people are kind of like, who is this? You get the feeling he's not normal, like the average everyday guy, especially a black guy. He's not over the top or anything like that in any angry way. He's passionate about the soul, living the soul's journey here with purpose and dignity and uniting people together. And he goes from being very, very way up forward on the top of his great big truck that he's built that says peace, unity, oneness, come together, all these different sayings that he has on it. And he puts on these vaudeville-styled shows in downtown Santa Cruz or wherever he shows up, and it's spontaneous. And people will look up and go, "Oh, what's this? Look at this! Oh my God!" And he's a man on a mission with God, very much like Dr. King. An impromptu rally would show up, and you'd be blown away.
Couldn't be busier now, I guess.
Yes, and he's always trying to survive, though. He takes odd jobs like moving people, and he's got a truck and all that kind of stuff. And people donate, and he's very much for real. But the people that pass by, one time we were up on the truck, right, and we looked down and we're doing our show, and he likes me to be his MC, and I egg him on, and I'll play the music and switch over the music and say, ladies and gentlemen, he's the hardest working man in show business. A modern day Martin Luther King, a prince for peace, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Curtis Relaford. And then he'll go and do his thing. And one time there was this lady, and I got down the light and said, Rob, go down and change the CD. He still uses CDs. I went down, and there was a lady waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, right at the sidewalk, and she's just like this. And I get down, and I said, can I help you? And she said, what the hell's going on here? Now, when somebody says it like that to you, it's very disconcerting. You know what I mean? And she thought this was a fraud. This is some kind of made up thing asking for donations. So she saw this plexiglass case with these bills all filling in it. And then I said, let me have you meet him. And I said, Curtis, you have a minute? And he would come down. May I help you, ma'am? In 3 minutes, he completely turned around that woman from a doubter to God bless you, sir. And she was very humbled because his vibe is so encompassing and overwhelming as far as his presence. He has focused on God so much that you feel like God is around here somewhere, and you get very self-conscious. Like, and she, oh, I'll be happy to donate to you. Never saw such a transformation in 3 minutes in a person.
Wow. Wow. We need more of it.
Yeah.
But I really want to get to your story, because obviously I've seen it. Thank you for sending these notes, by the way. I mean, it's you're doing my homework for me. But
Use them or not.
yeah, I looked at your site, and I understood that you were big on the UFO scene, from talking to Ollie, and yeah, I had no idea that you'd had a direct experience and written books about this, and that you've come back from that experience with something of value that people seem to have connected with a lot. I went on Amazon and ordered your book because I saw all these reviews and people were really very positive about it. Not one bad review, so.
Yeah, it's old now too.
Mm,
Yeah, the book's 20 years old now.
right.
More than 20. And we should have had the new one out, but it looks like it's all again postponed after several postponements. It's actually written. It's actually 95, 97% done. It'll come out next year when hopefully we can meet in person.
Which is the third book.
No, actually, kind of it is. It's a revision of the second book. We
Right.
just completely reformatted it and rewrote it. The first book was a real hit. We sold about 44,000 copies, which is not bad. It's not huge, but it's not bad.
So you collaborated with someone to get the story together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, Tony Stubbs on the first two books and Mary Jo Stresky on the third book, which she's revising it. And we added new stuff and changed around. Many people didn't read the second book or see it. It was a little too academic. That was being produced by Tony Stubbs. He's very British. He's passed away now, and he was, I want to make you more scholarly and more left brain, and he did. But I felt like it lost the heart that the first book had, and so she put that back in there. She says, "I think you should just be yourself. Don't try to be academic. That does not work for you."
Well, be yourself. I mean, that's a piece of advice that gets thrown around a lot, and it really does ring true, doesn't it? Really, it's just we're all here to find out who we are and why we're part of the puzzle, right?
Every day,
Yeah.
it's your soul's on like assignment. You've been commissioned here, in the material plane. You are here by divine appointment, from everything I've seen, my humble opinion.
And so if we just focus down and just give in a nutshell, that first book, what it depicts is that in 1977, I'm just reading through on the other monitor there, you were taken on board a spaceship.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
By some angel-like beings, basically.
Well, they're more like astronauts.
Right. Okay. I mean, they're like. Well, if we were going to pick a movie, what are they depicted like closely? Like, what do you imagine? Like,
Ooh, I'd have to
what's
think
the
about
image?
Well, one movie, the beings themselves weren't like the beings you see at the end of the movie in Close Encounters.
Right.
But the sunburn scene where the truck is on the railroad tracks with our cast member Roy Neary, played by Richard Dreyfuss, that actually has some similitude to me, because I came out of my experience with a tremendous sunburn, and I was soaked in something like an oil or like a honey, and I didn't know what happened, even because it happened in the middle of the night. Just right after Christmas, we had put away the presents. We were wrapping up. We were in Lake Tahoe. I was a young man of 22. It was 1977. End of a nice normal vacation with your parents and your sister and everything. I slept downstairs. I did a simple prayer that night, thanking God. And I happened to ask with a little tiny candle that night, if there's anything. I look at the nighttime sky in Lake Tahoe. This would be in where California meets the Nevada border, in the area of Heavenly. It's actually called Heavenly Valley, of all things. It's a ski resort and area for skiers. I'd been skiing all day, and then I just did a simple prayer and said, "Oh, if there's anything out there, I'd love to meet something out there eventually." Thinking in my lifetime, thinking like down the road something might reveal itself. Never really giving any real thought that anything would show up that night. But my mind didn't have room for that. And in the middle of the night, I was sound asleep and suddenly startled awake by the most unbelievable storm of light you can even imagine. Your mind doesn't have room for that. And the whole room became illumined. And like silver, I remember this bright silver light, all encompassing with flakes all over the room of indigo and violet, purple flakes. And of course I shot up. I was wondering what was happening. What's happening? And suddenly what looked like 3 astronauts materialized. Your mind doesn't have room for that when that happens, And so of course I went into almost a state of shock. And then before I knew it, I was placed in like a sphere of some kind of a bubble. And then I'm in this storm and suddenly I'm just floating in this blue like bubble. And it felt like side of the house dropped away because I didn't see any house. And I know that there's this white tunnel that's there, and I went through it. Now I would love to tell people, when you hear those stories of people that saw the light, went into the light, went through this tunnel of light, and what was waiting for you on the other side. Maybe they said Jesus was waiting for me, or the angels were waiting for me. That's actually not this story. When I went through this tunnel, I screamed inside. I was on fire. It was terrifying, terribly painful. And then finally I decided to surrender to death. I thought the only way out of this is just to surrender. I thought I'll just surrender to it. And once I surrendered and just completely let go, it let go of me. And I felt, it's better now. And then suddenly when I would resist again, it was like tremendous, force of going through this white light that was painful. And then suddenly I was in this sphere, a great big gray like sphere like room, no corners, no lights. There was nothing in the room. There was no one there to greet me. I know that would be a greater story. If there was someone there to greet me, that would be a much better story. But unfortunately, I'm just telling the story as I saw it, as experienced it, and I have to be truthful as I can about it. There was no one there. And then it didn't last long. And then suddenly while I'm in this blue bubble, I went back through this painful light. And then I was in the bedroom and lowered down on the bed, and then placed on the bed. And then suddenly everything went back up. And the ceiling in the side of the house just closed up. And then everything was over. It was over.
It's interesting. Like, I immediately wanted to reference cinema to understand maybe what it was like because sort of you think 1977, okay, Close Encounters came out in 1982, I think.
It came out actually at the very end of 77. It was very spontaneous. It was a Christmas release.
Sorry, that was E.T. E.T. came later on, right? Yeah.
Yes,
so it's interesting that a lot of the experience that you had was later then depicted in a lot of scenes from like things like Close Encounters and I'm thinking there's some other movie like it was very similar to. But yeah, it's interesting that perhaps people weren't drawing necessarily just on their imagination, but direct experiences for what was to come later in cinema and on TV.
Yeah, it feeds into it. I think that people's testimonies and then writers in Hollywood kind of write an amalgamation of those things that they read in books or see an article on in a magazine or talk to somebody, and they say, well, let's take that and let's make this story around it. Because encounters are nothing new on the planet. They go on daily, voluntarily, every day.
And so you really put an intention that you wanted an experience like this before it happened.
Interestingly enough, and the reason I came up with that is I was studying meditation at the time, just very beginning, realizing that, they say in the Vedas that thoughts are real things and that they actually have the ability to transfer, that if you concentrate your thoughts, there is something, there's a network, there's someone or something that hears that and can respond to it. This is why we have prayer. This is why we have chanting. This is why we have meditation, to take out all the erroneous cacophony of thoughts and try to still the mind to be a receiving unit. Like Maharishi was wonderful when he said, they asked John Lennon when he got back, I remember when I was a boy, he got back from the Himalayas, and they asked him, what did you learn while being in the Himalayas with Maharishi? Because people forget that kind of started the whole hippie movement that summer of '67, the idea of cosmic consciousness, so on and so forth. And he said, we learned that you had to sit still or you're never going to know. I thought that's riveting. That always has stayed with me. So, and to still my mind is a fantastic thing.
I mean, that's really when the knowledge as well was in its infancy in some shape or form. Now with things like the internet, and like people can get the message out, and there's a whole sort of market for mindfulness. Everybody's sort of getting the tapes, getting the books, going to retreats, and that knowledge is being passed on, and so it's interesting that it's with this where we are in this point in time. There's an awakening, but this kind of energy is also being used by certain powers like the mainstream media to put certain messages, and there's the good side and the bad side of it.
Yeah, the bad side kind of is they want to put a dark twist on it. There's something that's coming that wants to put you on a dinner plate. And, and that's actually Hollywood that does that. We know this. Let's put it this way. I think that a lot of the media and people sharing it in general is always influenced by this outer invisible network. And there will be many that will express that outer network for profit, motion picture sales, ticket sales, and add that element of what always seems to grab us, which is fear and the unknown, being dragged away or something. However, the flip side of what I said, that sometimes people would say to me years ago, they'd say, well, Rob, you sound like you're some kind of intergalactic Tony Robbins or something like that, because there's an element of personal growth in this cosmic message. And I said, well, yeah, that's true to a large degree. What I'm saying is that there is not a day where you're walking completely autonomously. There's sort of a committee that's walking with you, and that committee's in the invisible. And that committee kind of changes hands as they have interest in you, in me, in everyone here. There's a vested interest in our DNA as a collective, and there's an interest in our growth as we are going to be birthed into this new expression. And so you see the decades kind of passing by, how the consciousness is changing, because we don't talk like we did in the 50s. And we're not completely stuck like we were in one idea like we were in the mid 60s. And we're getting the idea that we're not alone. And it takes decades to just get you used to the idea of extraterrestrials. We have so many problems on the earth right now that it takes a long time to get you used to the idea of another culture. This is why I say disclosure is very, very difficult and comes in many different forms. And I know there's people out there that want to do a lecture and sell tickets and say, well, this is what it is. And people will see that version, but that's only one version. We're not really quite sure how this introduction comes out, because I've always said that physically we live here by a certain set of rules, values, and laws, and we can't even get along amongst our own kind. Another culture doing what I call an attempted landing. An attempted landing here would probably cause catastrophic results because we're not quite there yet. You know, we have so many problems on board, and it would cause a pullback on our medium of exchange. I hate to say that this is a money question again, but believe it, that's our system that we use. And people will pull back a fear of something completely unknown. So an attempted landing in a major metropolitan area doesn't really work very well. And so that's why you see these, these meetings are sort of always clandestine all the time. They're like people say, well, I claimed I had this experience, and this person claims I had this experience. And we saw this sighting, but the sighting is always, notice, they're always out of view slightly. They're always subjective, like, well, could be, could not be. There's never that one definitive sighting or landing where everybody gathers around and says, okay, this is it. How they introduce themselves probably is much more subtle than that over a period of time as individuals are kind of ready for this.
Well, if you think about nature, it's like wild animals. Like wild animals, most of them don't just wander into urban environments, do they? They would be quite shy of humans and coming, you know, they come at night or, yeah, so why would they just come and go, oh, let's come on the morning news and let ourselves be known?
Yeah.
So going back to your experience, right? So that you wake up like the next day. Are you like, oh my God, like how much of it did you recall? Because some people sort of like wonder whether it was a dream or they can't quite remember it and then later it comes back to them. Did you have to piece it together, or what was it like post that experience?
The first thing is I'm lying on the bed and I'm in a little bit of a convulsion. I have no idea what's really happened. I couldn't reason that it was real or a dream because all I knew is I was in a state of shock and I threw up over the side of the bed. Then I crawled along the floor and pulled myself up on this little vanity in the bathroom, little vanity mirror, and turned on the light. And I realized, I was going, what is this, you know? And I was trying to figure out why am I so sunburnt and I'm kind of soaked in something all over. And I'm thinking, what is this? As I went back and laid on the bed, I lay there in a state of shock thinking that maybe I've taken something, you know, and maybe the body has gone into a state of shock where I've secreted this. This is coming from the inside and then coming out. This is from my body. And then I didn't know what had happened. And then I kept thinking every time I could see it in my mind really clear, almost unusually clear, like not like a memory, but if I close my eyes, I can just see it. It's so in front of me. It's so vivid that I can see it. And then I passed out. Incredibly, I was able to just pass out when I woke.
How did you tell your family about it? Were they aware of this at the time, that this had happened? Or?
When I awoke, they were downstairs. I was still there lying on a couch that folded out, you know, into a bed. And I looked around and I just lied there. I remember my mother saying, are you ever going to get up? And I just kind of looked around like, everything is normal. How can this be? So I lied there and I thought to myself, I know what happened and I could see it very vividly. And I was terrified. And I somehow made the decision. I went into a little bit of denial at first. And then I decided not to say anything. I decided not to say anything. I didn't want to believe it. The odd thing is the week before this trip, I had just moved into a little cute little apartment in Los Gatos, California. And I'd stored my stuff there. I was 22 years old, then went on this trip and came back. And as my dad brought me home and he said goodbye to me, I'm still all the way home, just staring forward as we're driving home and thinking, you know, how could this happen? And they noticed how red I was. And I just thought, I'm not going to say anything because I don't believe it. It's just some kind of weird dream. Hence, I get home, I say goodbye to him, I closed the door, and I sat down on my couch. And that was the first day I was going to live alone. I'd never lived alone before. And so now I'm in there, and I decided I'm not going to say anything to anybody. Then I didn't go to work for about the first 10 days, and I stayed in my apartment. I just sat there and rocked and thought, how could this be? What is this? What is this? So the story kind of unfolds, and I get the idea I better go to maybe a bookstore and see if there's something that is known about this. That day I thought, oh, this is interesting. I thought it might have something to do with UFOs, but I didn't know anything about them. There was UFO magazine. I remember, I thought, oh, well, they have a magazine on this stuff. Then I bought Alien Meetings by Brad Steiger, and I bought the UFO Chronicles by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who today I think is sort of considered the father of this whole industry. He sort of started the first quote unquote UFO conference of its kind. And I opened up the magazine, and two things absolutely shocked me completely. There was an ad for what would be the first UFO conference of its kind. And that was going to be in San Francisco, California, at the San Francisco Airport Hilton Hotel. And it was going to be with Dr. J. Allen Hynek. I thought, wow. And then I opened up the magazine further, and to my utter astonishment, I don't even know how this is even possible, is a crude black and white photograph of what I saw, shot by an off-duty police officer, Jeff Greenshaw, in Falkville, Alabama in 1973. And I looked at that, I thought, that's impossible. That's impossible. I mean, there's only about 10, 15, 20% of what's there. It's missing the incredible light and auric field and all this lighting and activity and everything. But there it was. They looked like 8 feet tall with a visor, saw no faces, helmets flat on the side, round at the top with an orange antenna on top, about as thick as my thumb and about 7 inches high, that glowed very brilliantly. And I looked at that crude black and white photograph. I said, this cannot be. I just took it home, I thought. Then I thought, I got to go see this guy. And I went and saw Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I walked in. There was only maybe 18 of us there that day, at the most 16. There was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. There was the Hertax, which Desiree will say we were there. JJ can't remember. And then there was William Shatner, of all things.
Wow.
And I told my story to Dr. J. Allen Hynek on a little tiny cassette recorder. And that's how I was the first of all the speakers that you see today. I wouldn't say I'm maybe necessarily the first, that would be egotistical, but I was one of the very first that I'm now 64, going to be 65 in August. I'm one of the very first at the first UFO conference of its kind in May of 1978. And all these other pop, Giorgio Tsoukalos and David Wilcox and Stephen Greer and all these other guys, they had not happened yet. They were going through their lives. And so I was a young guy, that showed up at this thing.
Robert, what can you tell me about the person you were before you had the encounter? Like, who were you? Who did you want to be?
Well, I was never into real sports, things like that. I think the Beatles were a very big thing for me, obviously. And I went and saw the last live show for my 11th birthday. My dad took me, August 29th, 1966, at the height of when they were visiting the United States on their U.S. tour. And John Lennon was answering to all the press throughout the entire country. Each stop they made, about this statement that he made, we're more popular than Jesus. This was the statement that he made, was going all around, and he was answering for it. And of course, he had to say this wasn't coming from a better or greater thing. This was coming from just a flippant statement that he made, as we all make those kind of flippant statements about the ridiculousness of the situation, in this case, their popularity. And so I followed them very, very closely. I didn't have any brothers. I had pictures of them all over the wall. In 1967, when they went to South Maharishi, I was just turning 12 that summer, and I just thought, wow, what they're going to do, I'll follow. They seem to be tremendous influence. I like the wisdom of peace and activism that John Lennon got involved in, the spiritual part of George Harrison with his quest in the Vedas and rishis and renunciants. Sort of love Paul for just his niceness and wonderful music, and Ringo for his humor.
Why do you think they picked you? What was it about you? Do you think that they chose you to have this experience?
Before you're born, I think that you have pre-soul agreements, and these pre-soul agreements, first of all, as far as I'm studying, and I have to be humble about this because there's some that will act like they actually know. I just like to pass on information, more like a reporter that says this seems to be agreed upon. So let's take it from that point. Before you were born, you were light, and we don't remember that part. And there is a world that looks just like this. You're in a long succession of experience of what looks like this. You might say you are who you are today because you're the result of everything you've been. And there are many, I personally believe that there are many Earths like this in different aspects, at different development stages. Some are lighter. So at some point, that committee that you walk with, that know you, that you feel like, because you're totally autonomous here, you'll even deny that there is even such a thing. But that committee of people that you have been with, and there are various entities that are at various levels that are sort of vested in your growth, there'll be a decision made. And that decision made comes from, we see an opportunity here on Earth. There is a certain geographical location that you're going to be born into, certain time zone you're going to be born into, certain family you're going to be born into, a certain bloodline. And then the decision is made that you will come, a portion of you comes out of that world and then starts to infuse in the fetus and the baby, and then eventually the baby is ready to come out, and the baby comes out in this world. While the baby's out in this world, that would say be yourself, a lot of you is still on the other plane. And so over a period of time, some of that essence of that spirit, who you are, infuses in the baby grows larger and larger, begins to identify sound, objects, materialism, identification, and grows up to grow into awakening into this world until it eventually gets to the point where it denies everything I just told you. Because then you're almost like cut off from that. And so that's sort of a picture of the origin of the soul. And now this group of souls that have gone through that process, they feel this is a very interesting or different time than ever before. And there's this quickening feeling, because this quickening feeling is like, from the astrologer's point of view, and I hang with some really good ones, because they sort of have that ancient outline for identification of the soul through your attributes. Like, if you're born on a certain day, you might have more Scorpio. Scorpio might represent this. You following me? So you're in this world, and there's a quickening you just described, and that quickening is an overall collective of the souls that are here now. And only remember that as they are here all day long, many are departing every momentarily. Many are departing, as we know, leaving their bodies because of what we call death, but they're just transferring over, while there's an incoming group coming in that same process. So then at some point, the earth is being lifted to a slightly larger expression. And now it's at the point where the collective has amassed all this knowledge, good, bad, or indifferent, how you see that. And we're at the point of destroying the entire process. In other words, we could lose the entire process, and they don't want to let that happen. They feel, I believe they feel that this is a repository for all the incoming karmic bound souls, and that this DNA process is a pool gene for them too, and they don't want to lose this. And there's this quickening. So how we go through this passage in what they call the age of Aquarius. And some will say, well, it was the dawning of age of Aquarius in the 60s, and now we went through the 70s. And some people say, no, it's not until 2030, according to some astrologers. It's not until actually even 10 years from now. But we're entering into this period of vast, difficult changes. And we have to move through this passage very, very carefully. And each one's soul is being counted for what you contributed here. For the ones who commit crimes, they don't know any different. For the ones that commit crimes, they're just living out here. This is all there is for them. And they're interpreting the world as, okay, it's unfair. I have to get what I get, even at the expense of another soul, whatever. On the other hand, you and I will get more consciously awake. We try to illumine the others to the fact that this is an important process.
We're living in an age where there's just so much fear and turmoil and just complete chaos. What do you think it is? Why do you think love is so important? Is it important? Like, does it really matter if we just carry on, the way we're going, or what is the value in discovering love over these negative energies, these negative emotions?
It's vital because we're so primitive. Without that aspect of understanding the properties of love and concentrating on them and exemplifying them. We love the stories of random acts of kindness. When we sit in a movie, we have some people that love the fear and actually are moved by the fear, and they get this exhilarated state, and they'll pay money for that. There's others that love the ending of that movie where there is redemption of our characters. When we finally realize what was really, truly important after all this time, and we're lifted up into this place of love, hope, and wonder. And we're just so overcome by that, saying, if only the world could be like that and everything. And that state is a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Of course, we walk out of the theater and we go back to the norm and it dissipates like a cloud. But the idea is try to be exemplary in love as much as we can understand it by practicing day by day, just practicing. We're very, 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 very primitive. It's no wonder we haven't been completely overthrown, because I always kidded people saying, I'm thinking that they think it's more trouble than it's really worth, because we're so high maintenance in just our ideals and directives each day. But that's not to say that there isn't a fantastic amount of all those stories you hear about. James Van Praagh, for instance, the world famous author, and Danny Brinkley, who's a very close friend of mine, describe this exalted sense of love and connectedness. The one guy that stuck out for me, this is a good payoff. It's a guy named Dr. Zach Bush, who's kind of going viral right now. Yes. And he had an interesting happening just not too long ago, where he's a doctor. He was on a 36-hour shift, and he's in hospice care for people that are dying. And his job is, as a doctor, to make them comfortable, bring them back until they're truly ready to go. What would be the chances of 3 souls in a 36-hour period that all died on his shift? And he says, it's interesting, we put the paddles on him, we tried to bring them back. Each one was so different from the other 2. But all 3 reported an interesting thing that stuck out for him as they transferred from the material plane to the non-material plane. He said, each one came back and said, why did you bring me back? And he says, well, it's my job. It's what we do. It's my job and everything. And they described for the very first time in all of their life all these years have passed, millions of experiences. They're at the end of their life, and they moved from the material plane to the non-material plane. They described a sense for the first time of not being judged, that they were completely, totally accepted. And that feeling of not being judged, completely, totally accepted, the exaltation of love was so overwhelming that they only wanted to be in that, and they didn't want to come back. Most souls that have a near-death experience don't want to come back. They feel that because here, if you think about it, your thoughts all day long are judging this person, judging yourself, judging these situations, judging that. We're working in our mind all the time, every day in our mind. Well, how we would have done it differently, or how that guy messed us up. And we're lost in that. There's not that feeling of total liberation of like, I'm completely accepted before this light, and just that unbelievable. I've had that a few times happen in my life. It's overwhelming.
I tell you what I wanted to say about love and about that experience of going, these people have gone to that death experience and then not felt judged. That is exactly how I could describe the moment that I knew I wanted to be with my wife for the rest of my life. I met her on an acting course, and the two of us were rehearsing a scene together, and there was a moment where we paused and we were looking into one another's eyes, and it felt like a moment of like electricity, like zoom, like it almost went like all the way down your chakras sort of thing. And it was so amazing. Like we both talked about it afterwards, but at the time we didn't mention it. And it was like, it happened more than once. Like there felt like that kind of, real like charge of energy. And it was frightening, but really, really like we wanted more of it sort of thing. And I felt like that's how I describe it. I just connected with another person and I didn't feel judged at all. And that is a very, very powerful thing. And that's when you know that. I mean, fear has an energy, right? Like you go into a place and there's someone there and they're very angry, or someone's just had an argument, and there's definitely like this atmosphere that you can feel. But love, when you really feel it, it has a super, and you can't put words to it,
Yeah.
And I think that's the real incredible message that you can get to people, is that there's different avenues into that. You can do yoga and you can chant, and you can play music and you can dance, but when you connect with that, it's one of the greatest and most relieving experiences. All the stress and all the suffering that we put upon ourselves, or external entities put on us, there's a real avenue to something, and why not receive that today if you can receive it, because we're only here for a short time, and having this experience, why not have that? That's the ultimate, right?
Ultimate, absolutely.
But we're living in a time where there's pandemics, and now you've got this rioting and police brutality, and there's a whole plethora of things that we could add into the mix with that. And yet there's a simple answer to overcoming all this, and I was wondering if you could maybe, impart a bit of wisdom from your journey, and how we could perhaps give some food for thought for the people listening.
Um, I'm a graduate in a smaller course in behavioral science, but I was at Tony Robbins for 5 years. That said, one of the things about achieving a greater sense of emotional stability and emotional mastery, especially when reaching towards being maybe just love or being loving in general, is practice, consistency, and momentum. Those three, practice, consistency, and momentum, it's a daily reminder because we get so distracted in everything else of what I should be doing. We're not living in the moment. We're living in the future, regretting the past. We rarely are living in that moment where it's like reminding, okay, just say if you're talking to somebody, I'm talking to just this person. Say for you, we're having this conversation. I can remind myself to create a moment for that someone. Create a moment in the sense where I'm fully present and making them feel validated, significant, and approved of. That because the brain is very interesting. The brain doesn't really. Tomorrow, if somebody said, "Oh, well, Owen, what did you and Robert chat about?" Oh, well, yeah, I don't quite remember. We talked about ETs, we talked about ascension, or whatever. But what the brain remembers more is the emotional experience you had with that person. The brain tends to remember the overall kind of bottom line experience of then you say, well, but it was a really nice experience, and I felt really, great, like I met a new friend. If that's the case of this, this situation. If you meet somebody else and they're not present, then you feel a disconnect, and you disconnect from them, right? But if you really embody that moment of caring truly about somebody, say I work with homeless people on an irregular but fairly consistent basis, and I go to this relief camp that's here in Santa Cruz. I bring clothes and supplies. Sometimes I'll just hand it to them, and I'll just look at them, and I'll say, after I get their name, I'll say, how are you feeling today? How are you doing today? Not being patronizing, but being really caring. And what's going on? So some people get this reaction like, oh, somebody cares, or they finally are going to be heard, because we have such a disconnect all day long, every day. And they want that connection to just being, cared for, listened to, and made to feel significant for a moment. Because many people are disenfranchised emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. They're disconnected at a very deep level because of so much trauma or disconnection with their family, past or present. That just to practice that, I think that's probably how we get to that sort of next level. That's why we love those people that go on. Ellen DeGeneres rises up to extraordinary fame, right? In her show with millions of viewers a day. She's using humor, and she's really interested. And then she has a moral to their conversation, or say a wrap up to their conversation. What does this tell us, and why is this important to us? That's real payoff for that experience. The person goes away and goes, wow, I feel a little more complete. They listened to me. There was some kind of moment that was there, and we left on a great basis. They'll remember that much more than all the details of what was said in the last time.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is, and you're great for doing this show. I would like to do it again, but I think you're off to a really wonderful start. You're a wonderful host, very hospitable, gentle, encompassing. You have a nice mannerism about you. You're going to have a lot of great guests on your show. I'm seeing this growing a lot.
I've just got to fix a few technical hitches here or there, but really, thank you so much for giving me your time. And can we plug some stuff? What's your website? robertperala.com.
robertperala.com.
Your music, your books, everything's there.
Yeah, the music, the books there, everything. Right now we're working and contacting people on the particular single that's an older single, but we're reintroducing it, called Whatever Happened to the American Dream. It's beautifully beautifully orchestrated, beautiful song. You can go there. If you're a record company out there or an artist out there taking interest, or you hear this show, take a look at that. It's a beautiful song, and that's what's going on currently.
Well, with your permission, I'm going to pinch it and I'm going to put it on the end of this video.
That's my thrill, and thank you. My heart to yours.
I think the American dream is to have peace.
Friends, family, people that love you and care for you.
Being able to have security, whether that's in your home or your business.
Enjoying life, the little things in life.
All races, like getting along.
To me, the American dream is the ability to own a home.
Not having to worry.
Look at us, people that the world can trust. We'd like them to be just like us, loving the world too. It's our world too. It's our world too. Look at them, people that the world could mend. We'd like them to stop pretending, being unfaithful, it's true. It's our world too. It's our world too. It's a wonder that we're alive at all. Why can't they see? It's the thunder that hears their quiet calls. Why can't they be just like us? People that the world can trust. The difference in the policies, do American dreams come true? It's our world too. It's our world too.
We lost the American dream because of greed.
A lot of the Constitution, the rights has been taken away.
We also got away from being simple.
I think going back to what your word means.
I think we need new leadership.
These guys have been just behind closed doors, just, spending our money.
The American dream. Whatever happened to the American dream? Whatever happened to the dream that we knew and were told it was true? The American dream. Whatever happened to the American dream? Whatever happened to? It's for you. It was true. It was our dream too.
Don't you think that hope is needed more than anything else?
Absolutely.
I think for anyone to stay optimistic,
I like to have a house when I get older.
Taking care of us and making sure we're okay and trying to help the world as well.
The U.S., no matter how bad a situation, always works its way out.
The president that you all have your trust and hope and faith in.
This is our country, and we got to take it back.
American dream. Whatever happened to the American dream? Whatever happened to? It's for you. It was true. It was our dream too. It's 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 our dream.
Om.